I am joined today by a new colleague of mine who I am just loving because we are two peas in a pod. So let me tell you about Carrie Ann Madden. Carrie Ann is the creator and owner of KAM Fitness and Nutrition. She's a certified master trainer, nutrition coach, and certified menopause health and wellness specialist. Carrie has struggled with body image, yo-yo dieting, and exercise for as long as she can remember. Yes, hello. Uh, After years of trial and error, she decided to get scientific about these challenges and become a fitness professional to share her insights and experience with clients worldwide. Carrie and I are going to talk about mindset during this menopause time. Carrie Ann, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Amy, I'm so glad to see you again.
I know. So just to bring everybody up to speed, as you know, we fitness professionals have to do continuing education. I was doing mine to make sure that I am up to date and getting my continuing education credits. And because I am in the menopause phase of life or perimenopause, and my clients are, I took a NASM or NASM menopause continuing education. I really don't even remember what the name of it was, but you led it. And it was so good that I reached out to you on Instagram and I said, that was just great information. And so we connected from there. You invited me to your menopause coaches group, which is so good. And I am thrilled that you're here.
Thanks. And I am so glad. I didn't even know that the National Academy of Sports Medicine had posted that the workshop that I did. It was part of a online summit that we had as an organization, and I did it on that day. It appeared on that day, but then they pulled it out and they put it in their cadre of continuing education, which made me thrilled. And it was only after you reached out to me that I knew that it was still alive out
It
in the world. So
It was still alive. And I have to say, as a content creator, good on NASM
yes.
for repurposing their content and not letting it just have that one place. So I'm really glad that someone had the foresight, whatever, to do
Yes.
that.
And then
Okay.
thank you for joining our menopause coaches group. And you had talked about it when you had Amanda Thebe on, and I just wanted to say how grateful I was that you joined, because just a little aside for your listeners, that as and I can only speak to myself and Amy because we're of the same heart on this, that there's there's so much to know about the human body, and we just have a real passion for taking the absolute best care of our clients that we can. And it almost feels like it's a never ending educational journey because every person is different. And so having that space for us as coaches to come together and share, I just am really grateful that you became a part of that. So thank
Well,
you.
thank you for holding space for that. And you are right. Not only with the continuing education, everybody is different and we're all in these different circumstances. And just as Amanda Thebe talked about on the episode that we had with her, it is unique. And there are so many possible symptoms. There are so many possible ways that menopause can hit you, but it's not a checklist of, well, bam, bam, bam. Okay, yes, you're in it. Or, I mean, it's complicated and it's hard and it's confusing and it's exhausting and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that you are here today to talk with us because this perimenopause, menopause, all of that, I mean, can just throw us for a loop in a million different ways. And I want to talk about our mindset during this. That was one of the great pieces of education that you provided in that program that I took. So I would love to hear from your perspective as a trainer, as someone who is really has her hands dirty with a lot, dirty in a good way, but with a lot of women who are in this phase of life. What are some of the mindsets you see that are kind of holding women back during this transition? And I hate to start with a negative question, but I think let's just call it what it is because sometimes those mindsets can be challenging.
First, I want to tell you a little bit about my personal journey with menopause to kind of segue into that, because it illustrates the mindset that I had. So I think at the time, this was going back maybe 5 years. I think I noticed some things in my body changing, and I knew the word perimenopause. But the only things that I noticed was I started getting chin hairs. That was about all that I noticed. My period stayed the same, nothing was changing. And I said, oh, I must be having fluctuations in hormones for this to start happening. And it was common with women in my family that is one of the signs of getting older was, pronounced chin hairs. And then around that time, I got a new job, and I was really excited about that new job because it was in a very large facility, a fitness facility. And I was helping grand open a brand new club for this large chain. And as exciting as it was, and it was a big milestone for me because I had worked as an independent contractor for years. So having that recognition of a large corporation finding me and recruiting me to come do this, my self-esteem and my mindset were so high. I was so excited. And then as I
Yes.
began the job, it was pretty rigorous. I had to start work, not show up at work, but start with clients at 6 a.m. and I worked until 2 p.m., which doesn't seem,
That's a
extreme.
lot.
But I also had a 45-minute commute that was without traffic. So I just noticed that I started becoming more anxious. I was not sleeping well, and I really chalked it up to stress. And so, with the menopause transition, that sometimes things can present as another symptom, right? A lack of sleep, stress. I decreased the amount of steps I was taking in a day because I was driving so much. I had to change my workouts and shift my sleep patterns. So was it stress, or was it my body changing, or was it a combination of both? I don't know. But what I do know is that it became really unbearable to the point where I was starting to experience some anxiety in the middle of the night. I would wake up, like the world was ending, or I would be driving my car and I would be so terrified that someone was going to hit me or swerve in the road. And it never happened. But that if anybody's experienced anxiety before, they'll understand. But it was something completely out of my normal experience. And so again, I was just chalking it up to the stressful job. And then when COVID happened, I was on furlough, and I had my job. I still had my job. I was just furloughed from my job. So I was still getting paid, but I didn't have to drive all those miles to work. I didn't have the stress of my performance and what I needed to do on a daily basis to run that club. But the anxiety piece was still there. I was still waking up in the middle of the night. I was not sleeping. And then the perfect storm, I just started having hot flashes. So then I started saying, okay,
Oh,
you know,
here we go. Yeah.
and and I always encourage people to make sure that they get a physical and start talking about these things with their physician. And if they don't feel like their regular doctor has enough of an understanding of the transitionary time, that it's totally okay to seek out a menopause specialist. And I think Amanda talked about this, the national no North American Menopause Society and menopause.org, much easier to remember, menopause.org. They have a directory of physicians and nurses who have taken an extra level of certification or education to become more well versed in the menopause transition. So that was my long winded answer telling you where was my mindset at. I was really a lot of self blaming. It was me not being able to handle stress. I wasn't doing my meditation correctly. I wasn't I was just in this mindset that it was something that I needed to fix, that it was a character defect in me, that I needed to suck it up and put on my big girl pants and do my job. So I've seen that mindset with other clients because they're often confused about how their body's feeling. And we're getting all these messages from media, social media, and maybe our families of what our regular expectations are, and then when we start not feeling good, that kind of messes with our how we feel about ourselves. So that's one mindset I've seen. Others is like, well, all right, like I'm just, this is what happens in my life, and I'm just gonna put on weight, and I'm gonna get slower, and I'm gonna just switch to walking and yoga, which walking and yoga are awesome, but veering towards that slowing down instead of looking at where do I want to be in 20 or 30 years from now? And what do I need to do to help ensure that my body ages gracefully and in a way that I want it to? So that's another mindset I've seen, kind of that like, oh, it's all over. I'm, dried up, washed out. And we can
Kind of
get,
like a screw it mentality is what I
yeah.
hear you saying.
But we also get that message. Some people get that message from society or our families, like, you're supposed to slow down. You're supposed to retire. You're supposed to get a comfort height potty, one that's a little higher so
Oh,
you don't have to get into a squat. Or I want to live on one level. I don't want to have to do stairs. So there's legitimate reasons for doing those things. But I think that sometimes that mindset creeps up for a variety of different reasons of I'm just like, here's it. I'm old. There's nothing I can do. And then there's another mindset that I see that's like, all right, I've been driven all my life. All the things that I've been doing haven't worked. There's got to be an answer for me, and I'm going to go after it and try to find it. And I don't know. I know I'm started listening to a book that you recommended, the book Hope. So I'm currently listening to Hope. You had mentioned that on a podcast a really long time ago. I mean,
Hope Prevails by
maybe that,
Dr. Bankson.
I wished I had brought it's an
Okay,
audiobook, so
that's
I
okay.
don't have a physical copy to
Okay.
hold up. But I started listening to a book based on something I heard you say one time. And um, one thing that I found with this particular mindset is this other book called Mindset by Dr.
Hmm.
Carol Dweck, and she talks about two different types of mindsets. One is a fixed mindset, and that's, I'll give you a good example. Me, for example, I'm terrible at math. I'm always bad at math. I have math phobias. I'm never going to be good at math. Did you hear? There's no change there. The Carrie is going to be bad at math until the day she dies. That's a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset would be, there's something in my life that I'm struggling with. There must be an answer out there. I have the capacity with the right resources to be able to make traction on change. So that's a growth mindset. I'm not there yet, but there's still hope for me. And the fixed
Right.
mindset is, so maybe I need a math tutor, is what my growth mindset. So someone who has a majority growth mindset can have a fixed mindset about some things or a growth mindset about other things. So it's not this black and white.
Those are good. I just want to recap this. You talked about like kind of the self blame and questioning mindset, the screw it, and then what I wrote down is like self advocacy. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna learn and I'm gonna figure this out, and then we can kind of have a combination of that fixed in the growth mindset. So, Carrie, you're as a trainer, as someone who helps women move, and I know you're a huge advocate of strength training. And P.S., ladies, strength training with heavy weights, not the light ones, when possible. I want to kind of take this from somewhat from a fitness perspective, but also you can take it wherever your heart leads you. But like some of the changes that we need to allow ourselves to make, and we can kind of look at that from either the self advocacy or that growth mindset that you're just talking about of like, okay, this is different. And these are the changes that it's okay if I make.
So when you sent me some questions ahead of time, so I was able
Yes.
to think about this a little bit, and I want to encourage people, and when I work with people, the first thing when they want to change something, we sit down and we do some goal setting, and we look at what I call deep health, the six pillars of deep health. And it's just a framework that I learned from a company or an educational company called Precision Nutrition, where I
Yes.
have a master health coach certification. And instead of just looking at what am I doing for exercise, the physical aspect of my life, and what am I doing for nutrition, which is still the physical aspect of my life, what I'm taking into my body. We look at 6 other pillars, and I had to write
Can you
them
name
down.
those?
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I was
I
going to
wanted
say,
to.
can you name those? Because I know people are going to want to, and I'm real curious to see how these line up with the book that I just wrote for young women.
I know, and I can't wait to. I've been excited to hear about you talking about it on the podcast. So the first one is physical, like we said, and that's something that we often think about because we're so tied to moving and feeding ourselves. So physical is the first. The second is emotional, and some of us may be in tune with that, like how are our emotions affecting our day and our choices. Environmental, does our environment support, do we have the resources that we need to gain traction on the life that we want? So in our environment, if we don't have the resources, if we like to be outdoors in nature but we live downtown in a city, those aspects may challenge our goals. The fourth one is relational. How are the people around me, whether it's at work or at home or in my social life, how are they helping support, nurture, and encourage, or are they a roadblock in my quest to achieve what I want to with my life? And then there's the existential, and you talk a lot about this on the Grace Health podcast, because there is this dimension to our lives that is beyond the what we feel here, and it's a little bit different than the emotional. That's the existential. That's five. Now we're on to six, mental. Like,
Yeah.
what are the tools that we have to navigate stress? What are the resources that we have to help us, whether it's a great self-help book or whether it's a therapist or a best friend? Like, how do we navigate that mental piece of our life? So those are the aspects I like to, when someone wants to make change, I'll encourage them to start small and with the thing that they feel would be the easiest to gain traction on.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you for sharing those six. And yeah, I feel like I hit most of those. I don't talk a lot about the environmental, and this could be an entirely new podcast in general, but the socioeconomic
Mhm.
influences that we have, and just the ability, like, it's so easy for me to say go outside and go take a walk because I live in a safe neighborhood with sidewalks,
Mhm.
and not everybody has that. So I think that that's a great, I'm glad you pointed that out, and I just want to take the space to say yes, that is a true challenge and issue for so many Americans, and that's really beyond what is even controllable for them in some areas. So I love those. I love those six ones. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's talk to the women who, and I'm getting kind of personal here. Like, this
Mhm.
is, hi, hello, it's me, who has consistently exercised her whole life. She's just not feeling herself. She's having a hard time like doing the thing. I mean, and it's so funny because I prepped this, like you said, I give you the questions, and I am in a phase right as we speak. Actually, yesterday I thought, you know what? I'm either walking or yoga this week because I do not feel like myself. I mean, something is going on and I don't know what it is, and it's frustrating because, of course, kind of going back to that mindset that we were talking about earlier, like, but this is what I do. I do hit workouts. I do strength. And so there's a lot of self-talk for me in there. Anyway, so now we're getting into an individual therapy session. But so speak to me on, or anyone else who may be like, what is going on with me and my body and my mind?
Mm.
I'm supposed to do this. I like doing this. This makes me feel good normally. But right now, I just feel like crap. So, what kind of guidance would you give to that?
And I feel like Amanda touched on this as well. So if you haven't, if you're watching Amy and I right now or listening to us, go back and listen to that podcast because there were so many gems from Amanda. But when I'm helping someone like you, Amy, is that we look at it each day as a personal trainer. And I want to acknowledge that it is a luxury item for most people to have a personal trainer, that having a plan and having someone who is outside of the decision making, but who has a deep understanding of the day to day ups and downs of being in the menopause transition is extremely helpful.
Yeah.
However, not everybody has that ability to have that resource. So what I encourage people to do is either start using an app or a notebook with a piece of paper and become curious and compassionate to yourself every single day. So the first question, and start writing these things down, date it. Here's how I'm feeling today. I just don't feel like doing it. I made a plan, whether a coach made it for you or you made it for yourself. Today is supposed to be my hit day, and I am just not feeling my hit. So I want to move because I know that moving makes me feel better. So I'm going to try a 20% effort of my hit exercise. Like, I'm talking, if you were trying to do a jump squat, you're not even leaving the ground. You're like threatening to do a jump squat 10 times. If you were supposed to do a burpee, you are like doing a step back burpee and you're just reaching up to the sky. You're not jumping. And taking just maybe 1 or 2 rounds. Do you need more of a warm up? And is it just that brain fog piece? Or, and this is the hard part, this is where having the journal is really helpful, because if you do gain that momentum and you start doing the more effortful 100% of your hit, you answered your question. All right, it was just a little bit of and I'm going like this because I'm thinking it's a double-edged sword. So on one side of the sword, on one side of the side
Yeah.
is, I need a rest day. I need a mobility day. I need to do yoga. I need to walk. And then sometimes it's, I just need to get out of my own way and do what I had planned. And so if we start to create a catalog for ourselves or a little journal for ourselves, that like, that day I tried the hit and I couldn't move the next day, whoa, then we know the answer. It should have been yoga. And I hate the word should, because because I always say to my clients, try not to should all over yourself, because the decisions that we make on a daily basis are not going to make or break our entire health goal. I mean, yes, there's always an exception, right? If I like, drank a whole bottle of wine and then had a bottle of whiskey after that, that would have some really deep, I would be in the hospital and I would probably be dead. Like my but the
Right.
majority of the decisions, I'm not talking about anything crazy. If you chose to do the hit and you didn't feel well, then you would know, oh, the next time I kind of feel like this in the morning, I'm going to try the yoga instead. Or I'm going to see, how was my sleep last night? So starting to just become curious of why we feel that way. And then what are the things that make us feel better? And start making a list. Like, the last time I felt like this, I'm going to try that strategy again because it worked last time,
Yeah.
instead of feeling like we have to find the answer that's going to solve every single time.
And I think remembering that it's a trend, I love thinking about our health kind of like the stock market. You know, like the stock market has good days and bad days and ups and downs, and you can look at it within one day, and generally there's huge variations, and then you back up a week, but if you back up 10 years, 20 years, something like that, you're going to see a trend that it is higher than it was. And so I think that that's a, for me, this is me putting my finance degree to work, but it's remembering that it's the trend we're searching for. It's that like annualized return, if you will, and not so much what it is within one particular day or even week.
And that's something that I like to talk to my clients about too, not just, where we want to be in the short term, but one thing that I love, that Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr.
Oh
Peter
yeah.
Attia, they have two very wonderful podcasts. One's called the Huberman Lab, the other is called The Drive. And they are both One's an MD, the other is a PhD researcher, professor at a college. And the two of them, while I would love to have them have some more female experts on there and talk about how the things that they pronounce, how they apply to women in our age demographic. That's a little aside.
Yes, I know. Because most research is done on men
Yes.
in their 20s. Yes,
Yes.
I agree. But they're
The,
great researchers.
they're great researchers. So I don't, so when you listen to them, if you're like, how come they said to do this? And what I read about menopause said to do something different. Listen to it in open mind. You've got your curious and compassion journal going, so you can write things down in it. And one of the things that I love that they talk about is, what do you want to be able to do when you're much older? Like, say I want to live till I'm 90 years old. I mean, I would like to. And different than I want to live till I'm 100 and try to get to as old as I can. It's looking at it from a functionality standpoint. What do I want to be able to do? Well, personally, and for a lot of my clients, and I have clients that are older than I am, one of our goals is to be able to get up and down off the ground, even if it's only one time a day, just that one time that you need to either call for help or get back up and brush yourself off and not have to hit a medical alert bracelet or wait for hours until someone finds you. So that's one of our goals. My other is to be able to move my joints in some normal ranges of motion to the best of my ability. I also want to sleep well. A lot of my clients want to sleep well. So we have these goals that I'd like to be able to continue doing those things. Some of my clients participate in sport, like they may do this past weekend. We have something called the Jimmy Fund, and they raise money for cancer. And it's a 26.2-mile walk, and people can do it as part of a team or they can do the whole thing themselves. I have clients that are doing that in their 60s and they want to still do it when they're in their 90s. So looking at that later point, what do I want to be doing in that last decade, projected decade of my life? What do I need to be doing now in these
Right.
decades of my life that will help me stay there? Because we know, despite all the great things that we're doing, our muscle is going to start to decline. So it can start to decline like this, or it can start to decline like that. So what we do today is going to really enable us to have a much slower decline than if we had the give up mindset that we talked about earlier. And in Dr. Peter Attia's new book, I believe it was in his book, Outlive. It's a very good book. And he talks about, if you wanted to carry your groceries, say each grocery bag weighs 5 pounds. If you wanted to carry your own groceries into the house, or, from the car to the house when you're in your 90s, how heavy should you be practicing right now? And he had like a certain percentage. I've got to go back and listen and say, all right, I'm making this up. This wasn't in the book. So just as an example, if you haven't heard of farmer's carries, Amy and I can tell you about
Yeah.
that. It's basically just holding two weights in your hands and going for a walk, and not around the block, but so many feet with really great posture. And doing that as part of your workout, but with something that's maybe 5 times what you want to do when you're 80. And you'll have to listen to the book because I can't remember what it exactly he said. Well, you should walk around with two 25-pound ones if you want to do something like that, was his example. That's how we can plan for that, instead of a steep decline, aging healthfully and gracefully. So that's the things that I often talk to my clients about when they're wanting to make change, and how do we get started on that, looking at that marginal decade, as Dr. Attia calls it.
The other thing that comes to mind with that is Stephen Covey's like begin with the end in mind, which
Yes.
sounds a bit morbid. Like, okay, our end, what do we want it to look like? But when you were talking about living to your 90s, I have a great uncle who lived until he was 92 and a half. He was a member of the downtown YMCA in Tulsa, Oklahoma for 55 years. And Carrie Ann, when I tell you that man was so strong, he wasn't like big, but he continued going to that gym forever. And he really declined like the last maybe a year. I mean, it was a very, and it really wasn't even that bad. I mean, even when he was in hospice, he was still there. Like his body just was vibrant until the end, which is what we want. We want. But like you said, if that's where we want to be, we can't just decide to start in that last decade.
Right.
It's having that mindset. And I want to go back to something that you talked about earlier that I don't want to gloss over when you said, do you need a rest day or do you need to get out of your own way? Because I do think that is something that deserves a fair assessment from our innermost selves of like, am I just in my own way? Do I need to do the 20% of a workout? I love that guidance because it may be that once we get going, we're like, oh, I can do this. It was just my brain, which again, since we're talking about menopause, like that's a real thing. And so maybe letting our bodies guide us in that whichever way it is. And I will still say like this week I'm just taking everything down and I might be in my own way and I don't care because I need a break.
And that's where the compassion piece comes in. It's not about like I know I'm supposed to be lifting those heavy weights today or I'm supposed to be jumping because my bones are going to get brittle if I don't. It's about becoming a better friend to ourselves and a good listener of what our body but also our brain is telling us. I developed this habit, I think, during that time of understanding that my brain will think thoughts and I have choices on how I respond to those thoughts. And if I'm well rested, I do a better job, right? So if my brain is noticing a section of my body it doesn't like, or is I'm out exercising and I'm like, oh, am I ever going to get stronger? I feel like I'm just getting weaker. If my brain is sending me those messages, that the curiosity piece has me ask, where's that message coming from? And the compassion piece says, oh, brain. I know it sounds a little silly, but I'll talk to my brain in the third person to say, brain, so what do you need today? Like clearly that part of my brain that could be my sympathetic nervous system is riled up. That's my, it's the get things done system, but it's also the panic system. And, being able to be curious about where a thought of like, I just don't have it today. So is that my brain needing a break or is that my brain trying to expend the least amount of energy because it wants to be lazy? And I don't think that
Right.
there's a wrong answer in that. If you to have a week of rest and tap into that parasympathetic nervous system, I usually look at how long do I try to stay in that versus get back to the things that I know that are going to keep me on that trajectory of. And I wanted to clarify a few minutes ago. Yes, we all want to be like your grandfather or your uncle that was,
My great uncle.
your great uncle, but we all know that we don't. I mean, unless I know there's DNA tests that can tell us, potential trajectories of our lives. We don't know. We don't know if a car is
So
going to
true.
come out of nowhere. We don't know if we're going to develop dementia. We may not know those things, but like we talked about the stock market, I don't gamble, but I also like to think about the odds. Like if I want the odds to be in my favor, then I'm going to
Right.
just look at, all right, how long have I had this like rest week going on? Has it been 3 weeks? Maybe I need to,
Right.
but maybe I don't. Maybe something's wrong and I need to go to the doctor. So
Right.
that's,
No, that's a good point. I mean, as you know, faith guides my steps. And look, I mean, God's got a plan for us. And, we just need to be able to be vibrant and functional enough to do whatever it is that He's wanting us to do for His plan and His purpose for us and not inhibit that. So, yes, I'm with you. Like, we never know when God's going to call us home for sure. But yeah, so that's a really good point because there's some things that we have control over and there's some things we don't, but that we do, let's try and invest that time and energy into being vibrant and functional. I want to shift gears just a little bit. I know you are a lifelong learner and you are a researcher. I'm wondering if you have any books or products that you recommend for women who are wanting to learn more, or maybe just, we all have our little tools, right? Our tools to help
Yeah.
menopause. If you want to share any of those, just because we need a lot, we need a lot more than a hammer sometimes.
And I'm always listening to a podcast, or I mostly listen to nonfiction books. When I read a fiction book at night, it's to help me like get my brain to calm down and get ready for sleep. That's part of my sleep
Yes.
ritual. I loved Amanda Thiebb's book. You didn't pay me to say that. I think it is,
Menopocalypse.
and it is
Yes.
so much fun to listen to. I don't even think I own like the physical copy of it. I'm looking at all my books that are up here because she reads it and it's just such a joy. Or a British person reads it. So there's the accent and it's just, and from hearing her on the podcast that she is a hoot. She's just so much fun to listen to and talk to. So I love that book if you want just kind of like a general overview. If you've always been pretty routine about exercising, you consider yourself an active person, then I highly recommend the book Next Level by Dr. Stacy Sims and Celine Yeager, that is really geared towards the active menopausal person. They talk a lot about the science and covers just about every aspect of that. So they also have a podcast, or Celine Yeager has a podcast called Hit Play Not Pause,
Oh, yeah.
which I really, really enjoy. And they have a Facebook group if you want to connect with other people. The book Mindset by Carol Dweck, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Atomic Habits. It's written by
Yes.
James Clear. So if somebody's like, I just can't get out of my own way, how do I get started with goal setting? How do I gain a little traction? Those are my top favorites, but I gear my way towards reading more research backed, not that it's research and high level, but more that there's been multiple studies done on the material that they're presenting in the book, versus some I've read that will give some suggestions that I think if someone is really suffering, that they might not get the resources they need because a book might present this is the only way. So I like something that has research, but also, like Amanda and I and you both said, that every person is different. And just because one thing worked for me or for Amy or for any of the other guests doesn't mean that it's going to be the thing that's going to help you. But you are worthy. You are so worthy of finding the answers that you need. So
Yes.
those are some of my
Totally.
resources and like how I kind of pick them out. Yeah.
Those are great. And, as far as the habits one too, I credit Atomic Habits actually to helping me write my first book, because it was the habit stacking. It was this, the slow, just consistent habits. The other one too that I just listen, it's a great listen, is John Acuff's book, All It Takes Is a Goal. I got it
Hey,
there for a
I
second.
have read another John Acuff book, but not that one. I'm going to write it down.
Okay. It's his latest one. Listen to it, because number one, he provides like 10 extra stories that are on the audio version that are not in the real version. And as he's reading it, he is masterful at being very conversational with it. And so it doesn't feel like it's monotone. He's engaging. There's not as much research as is in Atomic Habits, but again, there's nothing new under the sun. Like, there's a lot of stuff out there. And so it can reach someone in a different way than another book on habits. But that's a great one as well. John Acuff's All It Takes Is a Goal. And
And
speaking of books, oh,
I
go on.
just thought of one more. And I have to look it up because I tried to, before we started recording, I was telling Amy about this book that I read, that I'm reading. And it's based on a Hope researcher, actually. It's called Hope Rising: How the Science of Hope Can Change Your Life. So
Wow.
if you're feeling like um, really discouraged, that authors present the case that hope is a skill. It isn't just you are or you aren't, kind of like mindset. The growth mindset says we can develop, and this book is, I'm still in like, maybe the first 3 hours of a long book. So I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm really loving it because it talks about the science and how, in giving examples of how we might become more resilient and more hopeful. And when we're more hopeful, then it's a little bit easier to take action on those goals that we have.
Yeah, so true. The mindset aspect of it is so important. And sometimes, you were talking earlier about the things that we say to ourselves. In my new book for young women called Your Core Strength, I named that the inner mean girl. We've all, I think everybody has seen Mean Girl, the one with
Yep.
Lindsay Lohan. And it's so funny because as my children went through high school, my youngest is a senior in high school right now, but my oldest one in particular, he was like, that movie is dead on. I'm like, I know this is, anyway, Tina Fey knows these things, honey. But, but I call it, the inner mean girl. And so as you were talking, it's a good reminder to, choosing how we respond to that inner mean girl. And even though she pipes up, we can, just like any other mean girl sitting in history class, we can choose how we respond to her as well. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of books, by the way, you have a new ebook coming out, and I would love for you to share that with people because I just think it sounds like such a wonderful resource that I would love for people to grab if it sounds like it's something that could help them.
Yeah, it really is a primer or a toolkit for people who are really curious about the menopause transition, wondering if they're starting to go through it or what it might be like going through it, and then giving some strategies and resources on how to begin to feel better if you're not feeling well, but how to prepare and get the resources gathered that you might need that will help you transition with a little bit more positivity and hope. And
Yeah.
it's 15 pages. It's not an exhaustive resource. So if you're already really well versed, it would just be a nice reminder of the things that you want to look for and some of the strategies that you could take. But for those listeners, if you are really befuddled by what's going on with your body or curious about what's going to happen, it's a great resource.
Okay, I have a couple questions that I ask all my guests. Number one is I love learning about people's tattoos because I have found that when people choose to put something on their body for the rest of their life, they often have a meaning behind it. So I was wondering if you have a tattoo, if you'd be willing to share what it is and the meaning behind it. And if you don't, but you had to get one, what would it be and where would it go?
Oh, I don't have a tattoo. And for the whole reason that you just said, to have it on my body for my whole entire life, because I think as I've evolved and grown over the years, I'd be like, whoa, if I got that tattoo, I don't know if I would be enjoying it right now. But I had to write down what I thought. So I really loved when Amanda was talking about, she tried to get a tattoo around her rib cage. So that's where I think I would put it because I would be a little bit shy about showing it to everybody. But I've seen other people have it. So maybe it would be better on my wrist. But begin again. Like, I love that saying, begin again. So when we feel like we've come to a roadblock or we've fallen down and it feels really hard to get up, that there's always a beginning, that we can, gather resources and gather support around us and just begin again.
That's beautiful. I
I'm
love
not going
that.
to get it though, but I
That's
wanted to answer
okay.
your question. I'm too afraid of the needle. Like, it was bad enough getting my ears pierced.
Okay, and tell people how they can connect with you.
Sure. Well, I'm at Carrie Ann Madden at Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. And so how you spell that is like the county of Kerry in Ireland, Kerry, Ann, Ann without an E, and then Madden, Madden. And no, I'm not related to the coach. I don't get to go to Super Bowls every year, nor the man who makes the shoes or any of that. No. It's my husband's
That's
last name. So Carrie Ann Madden. And then I have a blog that is, I wouldn't say it's defunct, but many years ago I went through pelvic organ prolapse and went through physical therapy and surgery. And I started to catalog that on carrieannmadden.com. So if you go there, it says to stay in touch with me, go find me on social media. But if you're going through that and you want to read a little bit about pelvic organ prolapse journey, that's a place. And then I do have a website that's KAM, my initials, KAM, fitnessandnutrition.com. So I'm
Love it.
developing a program for people who have heard they're supposed to be doing exercise, and it has a progressive program through it, from starting from I am sitting on the couch all the way up to learning to lift those heavier weights that are suggested. But it's infused with resources and tips and guidance for managing symptomology during the menopause transition. So it's pretty cool, but
Oh, I'm
that's
super
TBD.
excited.
So that's
Congratulations on that. And I know that you have done so much research and you are so well educated and a wonderful person to create that. So I look forward to that. One final question. What is the one simple thing you would like us to remember about our conversation today? Big or small? One simple thing.
just, I want to go back to that curiosity and compassion. I think that those have been the biggest helps for me and my clients, is to become curious about our mindsets and just the way that we're approaching this stage in our life, and where can we have compassion while we're trying to gain traction on the changes that we want to make.
Fantastic. Okay, that is all for today. Go out there and have a great day.